Hello and welcome back, everyone, to Rocket Rabbit Commentaries run through Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution on the PC. And this time we are continuing on with Season 3 of Yugioh GX, where, Professor Viper's biobands, forced us to get knocked out after our last duel with Axel. So, we're trying to figure that out, but also other weird shit is happening. Specifically, Tyranno, who we've not been introduced to but was very important in Season 2, is, also acting a bit weird. To the point where he actually gets possessed by his Dino spirit because he's got, dinosaur DNA strapped in his skeleton. Yes, it's a very weird storyline. And he ends up going after Jim Crocodile Cook because of Sheila the alligator. Yes, Jim Crocodile Cook has got Sheila the alligator on his back. This is a very weird season, is what I'm trying to get across.
Does it make it memorable?
A bit, to be perfectly honest, although not for the reason that it's supposed to be. As Annotation Script mentions here, yes, Jim Crocodile Cook is supposed to be a cross between Steve Irwin and Crocodile Dundee.
Why? Look at the size of this one. Got dinosaur DNA strapped to his back.
Alright.
He's got a weird helmet and cool hair.
Whoa, it is a cowboy hat, okay?
We're gonna fight him. That's what we're gonna do, boys and girls. We're gonna fight him. Gonna wrestle him down to the ground.
Okay, so Jim Cook's deck in the actual show is all about using fossils and rock type monsters in order to specifically do a decent amount of burn effects and field control effects against his opponents. Whereas Tyranno is about using the giant dinosaur structure deck that came out recently in order to overpower his opponents with just raw stats. He's actually relatively successful at it, to be perfectly honest, just not in show, in the game specifically, he's a relatively threatening opponent. Jim, on the other hand, only recently got his, the fossil stuff that he is supposed to spec into release his actual cards. So, in Link Evolution, he technically has the cards, I want to say, but it's only like the first wave, so it's not as good as they're supposed to be.
I was gonna say as a joke, because I'm not familiar with Jim Crocodile Cook, saying like, oh, you know how in Yu-Gi-Oh you can tell what a character runs just by looking at him. He's got a crocodile strapped to his back. I bet he runs rocks.
Well, he does run rocks, lots and lots of rocks.
He's a rock croc.
Or a crocodile rock, if you will. And this is one of Jim's bigger monsters, the Mega Rock Dragon. We're not going to be summoning it because it's not actually worthwhile. Look, during the period when Mega Rock Dragon was being released, the game was slow enough to actually allow you to use stuff like Catapult Zone and self-milling effects in order to make your Mega Rock Dragons relatively big, upwards of 4,200. Nowadays, no, we still are in a turn -1 format, and with that being the case, it's very difficult for pretty much any deck to not necessarily generate the resources to make a big Mega Rock Dragon, but have a big guy be all that you need. You usually need a big guy stapled with protection, and Mega Rock Dragon is almost certainly never going to get the protection stapled onto him that he wants.
Let's make another multiple piece golem.
And flip summon giant soldier of stone.
See, some people got their priorities straightened out.
Tyranno Infinity. Do we actually have enough here? No, we're 800 short, aren't we? Yeah, we're 800 short. Oh well.
We were at the beach. Everybody had matching decks.
Somebody went to a judge, and there he had a grudge.
There's Catapult Zone. Anyway, multiple beast golem. Finish this off, please. This duel isn't as easy as we made it look, to be perfectly honest. Jim needs to get multiple piece golem out relatively quickly, or else Tyranno is going to run over him with Black Tyranno. And Yeah, that's definitely a thing that can be an issue. But he's also running some pretty bad dinos like Elemensaurus, so, you know, the wins and losses, turns and roundabouts and such. Hey, Alexis. Yes, now we're actually continuing on with the Bioban story, where everyone wants to confront Professor Viper about it. But alongside that story, we get the actual story of Season 3, where Marcel gets possessed. Who is Marcel Bonaparte? His name is Marcel Bonaparte, and he got possessed. That is all that is relevant for right now.
And he speaks French.
Hey, Adrian Gecko. I like Adrian Gecko. I like Adrian Gecko because he's one of the few characters that actually calls out a lot of the tropes that it ends up being in the show during his one duel with Chaz. The other thing that's interesting about Adrian Gecko is that he is one of the few characters that gets an archetype tied to him that is actually somewhat viable. Because I'll be honest, Jim's rock archetype was, although definitely good in casual play, wasn't really viable. And Chaz's combination of Ojama and VWXYZ is not actually all that viable, especially when he tries to combine it with the Armed Dragons and blah 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 blah. But no, Adrian gets to play with Cloudians. I say that this archetype is viable, but as Annotation Gurdet mentions here, I don't know how Cloudians are supposed to win. Like, Poison Cloud is one of the only monsters that I know how to fucking use, to be perfectly honest. The big thing that you need to remember about the Cloudians is that their inability to be destroyed by battle makes up for the fact that they have very shitty stats. Not only does it make up for the fact that they have shitty stats, but because they do actually have stats on them, you can use them to mitigate a majority of the battle damage that you're going to take from your various opponents. The Cloudians are also, for the most part, trying to do very specifically a control style game plan, and they have it fully realized. But the big issue that they end up running into is the fact that their boss, Cloudian Eye of the Typhoon, ends up blowing up all of their monsters. To be perfectly honest, that's one of the only problems that the Cloudians actually have as an archetype, though. Their control aspects are incredibly well defined and even relatively well executed. But their stats means that they usually end up needing to be paired with a Spirit Barrier, and I don't think Adrian's running a copy of Spirit Barrier during this duel. Here's a new Union monster for us, VW Tiger Catapult. I remember having this card, Mr. Cloud.
Oh, good thing we're going up against an opponent whose attack position monsters don't have a lot of attack, because Cloudians automatically destroy themselves if they are found in face-up defense position.
Yeah, anyway, Poison Cloud. This is how you're supposed to use Poison Cloud. You're supposed to trade life points for field presence, and it actually works for Cloudians very, very well. See, we've already actually matched up most of the damage that we took from that.
I mean, we're just about even in the card advantage game. Now that we're at mid game, what's he gonna do next?
Well, we're gonna play our Storm Dragon, of course, and put a fog counter onto our Monster Destroyer. I remember that Altis specifically does discards, but I don't ever remember what the other named Cloudians do. The other big thing that Cloudians specifically want to do is sacrifice a bunch of monsters all at once, specifically for Cloudian Nimbus Man. And Cloudian Nimbus Man can actually be very, very big when you do it like that. But then Nimbus Man gets killed by any piece of removal in the game, so...
It's starting to come back to me how I reacted when I went up against Cloudians and then ended up losing against Cloudians. It was something like this. Like, all these guys are really small, so you would assume that their impact on the game individually is going to be relatively small, which is true. The thing is, though, is because they stay on the field for the duration of the game, though the sum of their individual inputs eventually is going to take out your opponent.
Yeah. Like right here, we now have enough damage on the board to just immediately kill Chaz. Thank you, Poison Claw.
Alright, and all we have to do, trade life points for card advantage, and we win.
Thank you, Ulthus.
Nice.
And so the biobands once again activate, forcing them to faint. We got Oja Magic, Premature Burial, and a copy of Ojama King. Alright. Now, Professor Viper. This is the primary antagonist for this half of the season. And you'll notice that we're already here, despite the fact that we've only had like 5 duels. That's because we end up skipping out a majority of the other half of the season. We're not going to see Jaden go through Dark Jaden's arc, okay? It's still going to happen, just very specifically off-screen.
Alright, let's give the story deck matchup a try.
Yes. Hey, I used the story deck in the Adrian fight. Come on.
Well, normally these story decks really get put to the screws during these high difficulty matches.
The thing is, Professor Thelonious doesn't have a high difficulty archetype. Professor Thelonious Viper is running a Venom Swamp deck, very specifically. And not only is he running what is explicitly a Venom Swamp deck, he is running a lot of reptile monsters that match up relatively well with Venom Swamp. The problem with that, of course, is that the Venom monsters are still very, very weak monsters. It's an interesting juxtaposition, because for a majority of Season 1 and 2, we're dealing with monsters that have, several thousands of attack and defense points. And then for Season 3, like, a majority of our bosses have less than 1,000 attack points on them. And as Annotation Script mentions here, I actually really like the theming of the Venom Swamp deck. I really do. Venom Swamp itself is a really nice control card. The Venom creatures are relatively okay, despite the fact that their stats are shit. But yeah, this is what ends up happening to Professor Thelonious pretty much anytime you fight against him. He gets out a monster, can't find his field spell, and then you just run over him.
So, is he trying to go for the Venabanaga win condition?
No, he's not going for Deity. He is going for King, but not Deity. He has the ability to go for Deity. I think his deck actually does have Deity in it, but it's not the thing that he's actively going for. And you can tell that he's not going for it because he also gets support from specifically later reptile archetypes, specifically Reptilian. I love the Reptilian archetype, for the record. It is easily one of my favorite. Archetypes ever printed, specifically due to a specific monster in the room. That is, Reptilian Naga. I fucking love Reptilian Naga. Oh, so awesome. And to be perfectly honest, the Reptilians do actually pair relatively well up with Venom Swamp. What they don't do, however, specifically, is actually win games that well. It's one of the bigger issues that the Reptilians actually have, in that at this point in the timeline of Yu-Gi-Oh, they don't actually exist yet. But even when they do get their first wave of support, Hydra isn't really a method for them to win the game. They're actually almost completely dependent on winning the game through Vosky. And although I really like Vosky, Vosky has issues actually scoring victories. Righteous Justice, blowing up a face down, and then Grand Mole.
So at the end of this,
offerings to the snake deity. Damn it.
It's the reptiles version of Icarus attack.
Yes. Except it actually destroys the reptile instead of attributing it.
Gotcha.
Hey, Venom Snake. Okay. Now that we actually have Necroshade in our graveyard, we can actually use Necroshade's effect in order to summon out either Blade Edge or Neos. We're going to go for Blade Edge because, well, to be perfectly honest, we want to eventually use Fusion Recovery in order to get into Wild Edge.
Sweet.
There we go. We killed us a Venom Snake. And then Venom Swamp puts a Venom counter on Blade Edge, pushing him down to 21.
We're being dragged down into the swamp.
Yes. Very slowly
shit, that
losing
happens
all of our
every
attack
phase.
points.
Destroy any monster whose attack becomes 0.
Yes.
So isn't the technicality that monsters that already have 0 attack are unaffected?
That is indeed the case, actually. It is one of the bigger problems that Venom Swamp has, is that it won't actually kill monsters that already have 0 attack points. It's why pairing Venom Swamp with the Reptilians is so genius, because Reptilians already gain bonus effects whenever monsters have 0 attack on the field.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Jade doesn't have any monsters that have 0 attack, so, you know, it doesn't really matter for him.
I'm gonna talk about all mouth and no bite.
Okay. Safety first, play the Dark Hole.
Alright, because Avion has exactly the attack points we need in order to win the game.
See,
Nice.
it was a Reptilian Naga. It's very good that I didn't attack that.
Beware of the Nagas.
Yes. Alright. And in the next episode, well, we have plot happening. Hey, Yubel.
The ancient evil Yubel.
Which is weird because even here, she's not actually called evil. She's definitely ancient, but, yeah, there's plot that we had to discover. Hey, Blair. Alright, in the next episode, we'll continue on with Season 3 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Be safe, everybody.